Welcome back. Join the Cage with Bards here on Nextsportstar.com. Big thanks to Joanne Calderwood, Aisling Daly, and Danielle West for appearing on the program. And don't forget to catch them Saturday night on the Invicta card, live around the world and free on InvictaFC.com. And now I had the opportunity to sit down and have a chat with none other than UFC Hall of Famer Ken Shamrock. Let's roll that, shall we? And here we are with the world's most dangerous man. He's competed for Pancrase, Pride, UFC. He's fought all the big names. The first UFC super fight champion, the title that would become the heavyweight title. A UFC Hall of Famer and all-time legend in the sport. Ken Shamrock joins the program today. How you doing, Ken?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you taking the time, man. You're one of the all-time greats, and it's a real thrill to be talking to you right now.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
All right. And if I can just take it right back to the beginning, you had a really rough upbringing, living in the car at age 10, being appointed a ward of the state, in and out of group homes before being taken in by Bob Shamrock. Just the fact that you're alive and well is a success story in itself. Do you ever stop and think to yourself, someone up there must really like me?
Well, there's somebody upstairs that really does, so I'm pretty fortunate for that. But I also had a lot of people in my life to really direct me in the right way. I know when I was younger, I was really roaming, 10 years old, lived out of a car, and didn't really know direction, and I got stabbed and got in the wrong crowd and ended up in juvenile hall at a young age. And then, I was fortunate to land in Bob Shamrock's home. I went to several placements and failed, ended up in Bob Shamrock's home. And, fortunately, I was in a real good place. It was a small town in Susanville, and the teachers, because I played sports and I was pretty good at sports, a lot of the teachers had reached out, really wanted to help me, and it gave me an opportunity to really settle in someplace where I felt wanted. And, of course, my dad, who adopted me, really gave me a home and a place to feel proud. So I had a lot of things happen for me along the way, and I was really blessed for that to happen. So, I did. I really had a lot of things go my way, but, you have to, a lot of things that trip you up and could turn you away, and I went through a lot of those things during my career, and I was able to find my way back. So, I was really blessed through my life, even though some people look at it and go, dude, you're cursed, but I ended up on my feet. So, I can't say that my life was anything but blessed.
Yeah, your early years put you on the right path. You found a proper channel for the aggression, I guess, and wound up at the forefront of the MMA boom. I'm talking, of course, about the Pancrase organization in Japan, when yourself, Masakatsu Funaki, and Minoru Suzuki brought Pancrase together. Could you have had any idea that it would usher in what would become really the next big major sport?
I knew that it was special. I had... Especially when I first started, I watched it on TV one time. One of my friends showed me, and I said, "Man, I want to try that." It just looked to me like it was something special. And when I started doing it, I fit right in. I had my first match and I won. And in my second match, I actually had a main event shot because of my first match. People really took to me as a foreigner. So I raised right to the top quickly and ended up. Having a match in the main event, and then ever since then I was always in the main event or semi-main event. I was always the main attraction, so I had a really, really good run. And so, it was really, really awesome to be a part of that and have those opportunities.
Do you ever think that Pancrase doesn't get the recognition it deserves in some circles?
I think that, it's definitely in its place. It was obviously started in Japan, and it was probably the first of its kind as far as grappling and striking and the technique on the ground, not so much the striking so much, but more the grappling on the ground. And it really molded me to be able to get into MMA. But MMA was and I should say not MMA, I should say no holds barred. Mm-hmm. So it really, no holds barred was really a whole different breed than what I was into with Pancrase. And it took a lot more patience and a lot more skill for you to actually transition from one submission to the other without getting punched. So there was a whole different aspect to it, but it definitely gave me an upper hand with the idea of the submissions, being able to take guys to the ground and be able to understand submissions when they didn't. Bush was the other one who understood that also. So we were definitely in the right place at the right time with these guys trying to still learn all that stuff. And most of them were strikers or wrestlers or judo players or things of that nature. But so we really had an opportunity at that time to really shine.
Yeah, and we've all heard the stories about back in the old days about the Lion's Den and how you guys would just be killing each other each day in training. How are you guys able to train that hard on a daily basis when it seems like nowadays a couple fighters a week drop out of a fight due to an injury suffered in training?
Well, I think that because of it, then it was no holds barred. It wasn't mixed martial arts, and there was no time limit, and there was no rules. So you almost had to train yourself to a point to where it was extreme, because what you were getting into was extreme, and you had to do things in training more than what you would do in the ring. So that's why our training schedule and the things that we did in training was so outlandish, because fighting no holds barred, bare knuckle, no rules, no time limit was outlandish. So we had to push ourselves there. We had to do those things, and we turned out 5 world champions because of it. You know, I had Jerry Bollinger for 1 year. He was in the fighter's house, and, you know, I had him there. I was training him, I was working him, and he fought a guy that was a 5-time Brazilian champion, and Jerry beat him. And so that just goes to show you the type of training that we do with these guys doing regular, you know, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and these other things that are supposed to be comparable to no holds barred, which, you know, as you see, they're not, because you have to put yourself into a position to where it's beyond what you're capable of doing, which is getting punched bare knuckle, going with no time limit, and having no rules. And so we were able to put ourselves in those positions and be able, when we walked in the ring, we knew there was nothing we hadn't seen.
Mm-hmm. And just the collection of talent around you, yourself, obviously, you mentioned Jerry Bolander. We've had Guy Mesger on the program before, your brother Frank. Could you tell in those days, just looking around at the people around you, that you were doing something special?
No. I felt like we had something special. I felt like we had a brotherhood. I felt like we were strong. We were bonded. We were the very first ones to put together the team. We were the very first ones to put together the fighter's house, where they lived together, they trained together, they ate together. You know, I mean, they did everything together, so they had this bond. And so we were the first ones to put that together, and it really worked, because when you're training, people think this is an individual sport, and it's not. It's a team sport, because you have to have people around you to support you and get you ready and make sure you're doing the right things, and some people to fall back on when you go through hard times and stuff of that nature. So we had something special, and you know, I don't think it's been emulated to this day with the kind of things that we had.
Mm-hmm. And you were known as one of the best in the sport, obviously, in the 90s, and then you went and you did the WWF Pro Wrestling for a couple of years. You came back to MMA in Pride, and you looked as good as you ever have. The win over Otsuka, you showed great stand-up against Fujita. Then you had that absolute war with Don Fry, and that fight is among the greatest and most brutal fights I've ever seen. Did you feel that you were able to come back to MMA without missing a beat after competing in the WWF?
You know, it was anytime you get away from something, especially something that's so young, right? And it's developing quite fast. It's always changing, you know, because like when I first got into it, it was an HB. Mm-hmm. When I got back into it, it was MMA. So it had changed quite a bit. And so I had a lot of adaptation to do, you know, and they had weight classes, and, you know, they were, you know, just really rounds, they had rounds, and they were judging, and it just became more political and more commercial, and there's things that I had to adapt to, you know, for me to get in there and really be successful. And as I think most people know, when I did come back to WWF, I had a par career there. It wasn't like when I first was in it and I was there. When I came back, I struggled quite a bit when I went back into the UFC.
Mm-hmm. And how do you compare the fighters competing now to those early days? Obviously, it's more of a sport now than it was a fight mentality in the early days. And there are fighters that criticize more for point fighting now than actually going out and just laying it out on the line like guys in your era did.
Well, it was different then, because when I fought, you fought whoever they put in front of you. You didn't even know you were going to fight in the next round, you know, and so you were always ready to fight whoever. It was NHB, and no time, no rules. I mean, so you would put yourself through some hell in training to make sure you were ready for anybody. And but today's thing, I think, is what makes it much different is that it is prize fighting. It's a business now, and these guys have to be smart. You know, I know John Jones got really hammered about making a decision because his opponent dropped out. Making a decision on who he was going to fight. He had that option. He had a fight set. He was willing to do that fight. He was all ready to do it. His opponent dropped out, and they wanted to throw somebody in on him that he didn't agree to, and then they tried to make him look bad for it. And to me, it's like this. This is a business now. It's not like when I was in it where you fought whoever and however many times in one night. It's a business now. You have to take care of yourself, make sure you're prepared 100% for whoever they're putting in front of you. And if it changes, then you have to make sure you take care of your career after that.
So you support John Jones's refusal to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice? Because when I thought of that, I thought back to when you fought Dan Severn in Michigan, and you had the athletic commission breathing down your neck. They were changing the rules on you, and you had some pretty serious injuries that you had coming in and training. But you went on, you saved the show anyway.
Yeah, that was difficult for me because I had everybody plus my dad saying that you need to do this, and you could still beat him. And it was like, I don't think they realized, and even my dad, I don't think at the time really realized that the injuries that I had and the obstruction I had with doing submissions, I couldn't, I had a cracked rib and a fractured nose. And so for me to be able to move around on the ground like submissions and stuff, I was really, really slowed down. As they seen when I went for Dan's back in that fight, when I could have caught his back and choked him out, I slid off because I couldn't put my hooks in. Because my ribs were so strained, and if I put my hooks in, I knew I would have to strain more, and it could cause me to severely, puncture a lung, and I knew this. I knew that I had severe problems, so I knew what I could do and couldn't do, and so I went into the fight, even though I was injured, and I had my opportunities. I was going to beat the guy down with fists because I knew I could throw hands, and I knew I could kick. And so when I was going to do that, then they took those punches away, and I was basically handicapped with nothing. I mean, I couldn't do anything from there. Although Dan still punched, I refused to because it was the sanctioning rules. And even though we were told, yeah, don't worry about it, we'll find it another time. But I work with kids, and I've always worked with kids, and I always try and stay to whatever's supposed to be within the rules, because I know that's what got me through in my life as a child, and me working with other kids going through the same things. I preach, stay within the rules, and you can do whatever you want in life, but you must stay within those rules. The minute you go outside of those rules, you're shaming yourself and your family and everybody around you, so don't do it.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely want to talk with you more about your work with kids in a bit, but the fans nowadays, they remember you most for feuding with Tito Ortiz on The Ultimate Fighter and UFC 40 and the other events. How much of that was hype and how much was real dislike? Because it seemed like it started as a real dislike between the two of you, but then after your third fight, your first words to him in the cage were, "We just made a whole lot of money."
Well, yeah, it was about a whole lot of money, I mean, obviously the money was starting to come in there, nothing like it is now, but, we were starting to reach some, decent numbers, and, I remember after it was over, me personally, I have to have something to go into the ring with that I can chew on, something that I can really look at the guy and get mad at. Mm-hmm. I've been that way my whole life when I get into fights. I just don't fight, like most people could go in there and they can punch somebody and they can submit somebody and they can, and be all calm and collective and technical. Me, I'm not like that. I'm not built that way. I have to be very emotional and I have to be very tied up into whatever I'm doing and very focused. And so that's what it does for me is when I look at somebody and I find stuff. And Tito I didn't have to look too far to find anything I disliked about him. So it really worked out to my favor, even though at the time, I was at the end of my career. I was 36 years old when I was fighting him. So, I was definitely at the end of my career, but yet because of the spot that the UFC was in, they were dying. They were getting ready to shut the doors. I came back. I went in there and fought Tito. I made some decent money, and nothing what I probably should have made, but, that's hindsight. But, Tito was there. I thought it was a great match. It was a great way for me to save the UFC and help bring those numbers up where they should be, and I did that.
Yeah. And what was your reaction when Tito retired?
It was interesting that I was asked that question when I was at the UFC, convention, and people asked, so what do you think about Tito retiring? And I said, I think it's kind of funny. I said, because I guess you can kind of see how he struggles in his fights right now. And I said, I guess you can kind of understand where I was at when I fought him.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that building rivalries, like the rivalry you had with Tito, like the rivalry you had with Hoist, do you think that's key to promoting fights people want to see? Because there doesn't seem to be as much in the way of the old school rivalries as today.
Well, I think you have to get started. Jack Johnson and Jeffries,
Yeah.
Boxing back in the 1918, there was feuds. It was the white hope against the black man, and that built feud. And you can go right on down the road, the German against the black man. It's always there's this feud that people have to have. But once it gets going, and people are used to watching it, and they're getting locked in on what it's about, then it's not so much about the feud anymore. It's actually about the fight. But there's no way people are just going to roll in and watch something when they don't understand it. So there's got to be something else there.
So are you a fan of a guy like Chael Sonnen, who does as much to sell a fight as anyone in the sport?
Well, I think Chael Sonnen has his place. Tito had his place, Tank had his place, Hoist had his place. There's always places for guys like that, and as long as they produce inside the ring, then that's their angle. That's their angle. Let them do what they want to do, man. That's just the way it is. As long as you're not insulting anybody's family, going after anybody's kids, hey, game on.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you didn't feel you got to the amount of money that you probably should have from the Tito fights. You made some comments on ESPN's Outside the Lines about fighter pay that seemed to anger Dana White. Were you surprised that Dana got as belligerent as he did in his response?
Well, he did, because they have a lot to hide. They don't want to open the books up. They don't want to show people how much money they're making. If they did that, these guys would be pissed, because they're not even getting a tenth of what they should get out of this stuff. There's a lot of money rolling in here, and people don't even know that. And if they didn't have anything to hide, why wouldn't they open the books? There's nothing that's going to hurt them. It's business. Mm-hmm. Don't care. Boxing does it. Anybody that's a business like that that's not a private business, they have to open their books up. So when you're a private business, the only reason why you wouldn't do that is because you're hiding something.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, I can open up the sports page and I know automatically what Eli Manning makes, for example, just because it's right there in the sports section. So, do you think that they keep the Anderson Silva money and the GSP money secret? Because if you're, I don't want to name anyone, but like a mid-tier UFC guy, you would look at that and say, well, hey, where's my cut?
Oh, absolutely. These guys, listen, man, you don't have one without the other, right? So it's got to be a fair trade. These guys are, and it's like myself, we started this thing. We didn't make much money, I always at the tail end of it, and I don't think I got what I deserved as far as the numbers that rolled in and what I was promised, but, whatever. I made my bet, I sleep in it. But I think the guys now are not really understanding how their bet is made, and they need to understand the money's coming in and how much these guys are making, and as opposed to what these open guys on the open card are, they're on pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. Not making what they should make, because if they're on pay-per-view, they need to be making some money. They need to be making $500,000 to $1 million. These guys are making $100,000, $50,000 on the undercard on a pay-per-view event. That's crazy.
Yeah. And every other major professional sport seems to have some sort of pension program. The NFL does, the NHL, baseball, everything. Should UFC be setting something out like that to assist retired fighters? And could something happen like that without the fighters unionizing?
Well, I think, it's a shame, because this is one of those sports where it's not, even though it is, but people don't look at it as a team sport, and that, they should be looking after each other even after people are done fighting, because without those people that were ahead of them, they'd probably never be here, especially the times we went through where they were trying to shut it down. And I was the face. I was the guy struggling and fighting and trying to keep this thing alive. We did that with the different types of feuds and things. Because there's three different times this thing could have been shut down if it wasn't for me pulling in the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually believe there has to be, at least now, since, they're breaking numbers that are bigger than boxing, that they need to start looking at these guys that are getting hurt, these guys that had potential to be a world champion, but something happened. They broke a bone, or they got a concussion, or something happened. And they need to start looking at some of these things where these guys can get some medical benefits and some things, just because, they put their whole life into it, you can't go into this thing halfway anymore. You've got to be all in or out. And so we got to look at that. We got to figure out how, this thing can keep paying these guys back, because there's enough money there that they should do that.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because I had the opportunity to speak with Gary Goodridge recently, and it was kind of sad, really, because he gave so much for the sport, and now he's had so many concussions that he literally has to carry his iPhone with him from point to point just to remember what he's doing. And you look at all the money rolling in now, it's like, well, can't they do something for guys like Gary?
It's sad because for some reason, anytime that you try and bring this up, they squash it, because they control the media. They basically let them, whatever the media says, they control it. It's a monopoly, and they're not going to allow these type of things to come to fruition. But it is sad, and I walked around and I've seen a lot of these guys who have been in the sport that are basically bums. They struggle with speech. They struggle with sight. Motor skills. And they push that under the rug. They don't want to be a part of that. They don't want to be associated with that. But the bottom line is they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, moving back into actual fighting from the pension and the retirement side of things, it looked like you were going to have a boxer versus MMA fight against James Toney, and that kind of fell apart. What happened there? Because that seemed like an interesting matchup, if nothing else.
Yeah, I thought it would be, that's the reason why I looked at it. Said, especially at my age, if I'm going to fight, I want it to be something that's fun and interesting. So I thought it was, so I took the fight, and, just as always, I got to, piss people off and get in his face and make sure that I got something to chew on. And so we got that going, and he was supposed to go overseas to Russia or Germany or somebody and fight some guy, and after he was done with that, we were going to start promoting this fight. Well, he went over there, and he just got beat up. And ever since that fight, when I heard he got beat up, I haven't heard from the guy hide nor hair. He's underground.
I see. Is there any other fight that would make you want to come back? Maybe a Legends fight, something against a Hoist or a Tank or a Dan Severn, or even your brother Frank.
Yeah, those, if I'm going to fight and I'm going to, get in the ring again, I want to make sure it's something that I want and something that I think the fans would enjoy. And one of them is Dan Severn, trying to get that to happen. I know Dan wants to do it, and I want to do it. And then there's Frank and there's Hoist Gracie, but neither one of those guys want to do it. So I don't think that's going to happen. And possibly if we can put the right stuff together, then maybe we'll have me in a third, the rubber match between me and Dan Severn.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that. How far is that in negotiations? Because you said you both want to do it. I had Dan on the show before. He expressed interest as well. So how close is that to legitimately happening?
Well, I think we're still a little bit of ways from it, but I think from me and Dan's standpoint that it's a done deal. Now it's basically making sure you've got the numbers in place and that it makes sense for us to do it, because this is a fight, I think, that can generate a lot of interest and, and make some money for Dan to be able to walk off into the sunset, So we'll make sure it's done right.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. And I was looking on your website, and you're promoting the Shamrock Triple Jim project. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, we actually got together with a couple guys, Ireland descendants, and they wanted to put together something that kind of fit my personality. And, I was always been the kind of guy that did body weight squats and push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups and, just core training with bands and different things like that. And I started all that stuff. And, so we put together something that I thought would represent me and the kind of person that I am and coming to training and basic stuff. So together this thing that you can hook together, and you can hook it on your door jam, and you can do pull-ups and sit-ups, and squats and push-ups and curls and hamstrings and triceps. And so it's got all this. It's all the major body parts that you can do with body weight. and resistance. So I think it's, it really represents who I am as far as not having all these little fancy little pulleys and little pins and these different things that you see now that are real fancy and have all these little pulleys that help, with the resistance and things like that. I like the true body weight resistance.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks great. And we talked earlier about your work with kids. And is that something that you felt compelled to do because of your dad, Bob Shamrock, and the way he was able to take in kids? Did you feel a responsibility to carry on his work in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I was blessed. I know I went through hell as a kid and, didn't know which direction I was going to be going and living in a car and getting stabbed and all these bad things and then end up in placement and then, living in a group home and then having an opportunity to go to college, do some things there for football. Then all of a sudden I'm a professional fighter. Then I go through a lot of struggles trying to deal with the money and the power and all those things. So, I had a lot of stuff to deal with. And, I got through it. I came through it and landed on my feet. And because of that road that I've taken, I have a huge responsibility to be able to turn around and help some kids that are coming from where I was and just basically giving them a little help, understanding who they are and what their problem is and how they can actually take those problems and put it into something positive. So, that's the reason why I am so, driven to help kids. I did it during my career. I went and visited different places. I donated money, and on my own. I didn't do it for TV or for anybody else's purposes, but for me to go out and help kids that are at risk. And so I have this opportunity to do something that my dad started, and that I can finish. So it is a responsibility, and I think I take it very seriously.
And with these at-risk kids, do you try to steer them towards grappling or towards mixed martial arts as an outlet for their aggression, or is it just mainly giving them the life skills that they're going to need to get through, what life is in the 21st century?
Well, it's hard, too. I know once I get the home up and going, I'll be able to spend more time, so then I'll be able to plant seeds and be able to water it and nurture it and see them grow. But right now, because sometimes I just go and visit these guys, and they ask questions and just different things like that, and I've got to lead them in a direction. I've got to give them some food for thought, so that as they're going through their difficult life, that they can actually latch on to something that I say. And so a lot of times these kids, I have to ask them, who are they? What do you do? What do you like? A lot of kids like to draw. A lot of kids like to sing or rap or play sports or anything. But whatever it is, I always try and let them know that that's their out. That's where they need to release that energy. That's where they need to release that disappointment and the disappointments in their life with parents and counselors and school. They need places to go and feel safe and feel comfortable and feel important. And I said, that's your outlet. That's where you need to go. You need to lock into something that you feel good at, that you feel that you can do good, and lock into that and do it.
Well put. And you mentioned that you're building a group home. Is there any way that people can donate towards that cause at all?
Yeah, we're getting ready, and we'll actually put up a site when we're ready. Right now, we had some donations, but we're still in the beginning stages, and I don't want to have too many people doing that right now until we know exactly what the facility is going to look like and how big it's going to be. Right now, we're looking to try and do 100 boys and 100 girls, but right now we're looking in Gerlach. We got some buildings out there we've been interested in for quite some time, and we're trying to figure out how to progress that forward, and if it's going to be a good spot, because it is pretty far out, or if we might have to move something like that farther in. So there's a lot of decisions we have to make before we really start going into that heavy, trying to get money donated and trying to get this thing going. So right now it's a seed that's planted, and we're watering it, and we're trying to nurture it to see where it goes.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about that, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to visit the program today. You are one of the all-time greats, one of the all-time legends. Last question for you. It's something we ask everyone that comes on the program. If you had the opportunity, you get to punch one person from any walk of life right in the face, who would it be?
Frank Shamrock.
Frank Shamrock. No hesitation on that answer either, I noticed.
No, that's personal.
Fair enough. Well, Ken, again, thank you for your time today. Tell people where they can find you in the internet universe, and any other shout-outs or plugs you want to do, feel free, my friend.
Yeah, you know, if they want to get a hold of us, and if you need any things that we're doing, it's KenShamrock.com.
Beautiful. Ken, the world's most dangerous man, Shamrock, here on In the Cage with Bards on Nextsportstar.com.